They are at an altitude of 9,750 meters. The engine noise is constant, almost hypnotic. Outside, the sky is a sea of clouds. Inside, the passengers are dozing, watching movies, and talking on the phone. Everything seems quiet, until the Earth disappears. No warning, no logic. The plane crashes, the lights flicker, oxygen masks fall off, and the next moment, the silence gives way to panic. People are screaming, some are praying, others are hastily writing goodbyes to their loved one. I love you, I'm sorry about everything. Goodbye. Sounds like a scene from a movie? But it isn't. It happened, and it happened. More often than we'd like to admit. For a long time, flying was considered synonymous with safety. Statistics proudly claimed that it was easier to choke on a grape than to die in a plane crash. Boarding a plane was an automatic, almost banal gesture. You got in, took a nap, and landed. Again and again. Until suddenly, something changed. In recent weeks, horrific stories have dominated the headlines. From Tokyo to New Delhi, from Jakarta to Shanghai, routine flights have become traumatic experiences, and the sense is growing that we are living in a new era in the skies, one in which the promise of safety is being tested by a series of fears, failures, and, in some cases, tragedy. What's up? At first, it seemed like a coincidence. A crash here, a crash there, a scare, an emergency landing, severe turbulence. Things that had been a given until then. But then came the Japan Airlines flight, which crashed abruptly, leaving the passengers in shock. A series of Air India crashes followed, one of which ended in a catastrophe that killed hundreds. And the question that was once whispered is now on everyone's lips. Is flying still safe? But before we look for technical or statistical answer, it might be better to face a simpler and more uncomfortable truth. The fear returned. Fear of flying. Fear of not understanding what is happening. Fear of putting too much trust in a system that until yesterday seemed infallible. And this fear stems not only from the accidents themselves, but also from the feeling of losing control, floating through the skies, not knowing whether the pilot hasn't gotten enough sleep, whether the aircraft has old components, whether the control tower is overloaded, or whether the aircraft manufacturer has concealed a defect. This may all seem like paranoia until the plane crash. And right now, no statistics can reassure us. No warning. All we can do is wait. Let's hope it's just a scare. Let's hope it happened. Let's hope we never have to experience any of this again. Modern aviation was built on a silent pact, trust, and this pact has worked for decades. But now the first cracks are appearing. Small, subtle, but visible. And they're not just in the aircraft, but also behind the scenes. Lack of maintenance, cost-cutting, hasty training of new specialists, profit pressure, an aging fleet. Are we moving toward progress, or are we flirting with a quiet regression? And most importantly, if fear has returned, what does it want to tell us? Because maybe the problem isn't flying at all. Maybe the problem is continuing to fly as if nothing had happened, as if we hadn't seen oxygen masks falling from the ceiling, not just in airplanes, but across the entire aviation industry. Maybe we should listen to this fear instead of denying it, because it may be the only alarm that still works. But what if these accidents weren't just accidents? What if there was a hidden pattern behind the crashes, panic attacks, and emergency landings, and a name that appeared in almost every one of them? In the next part, we will tell you why the name Boeing is at the heart of this crisis, and shows how the company that was once a symbol of security has become synonymous with extreme distrust. Have you ever been on a plane that rocked a little more than usual? That moment when the fasten seatbelt sign flashes, and for a few seconds, you pretend everything's fine, but your heart suddenly starts beating faster? It's in that exact moment, between reason telling you it's normal and instinct whispering something's wrong, that the new fear of flying arises. What if this time there wasn't just turbulence? What happens if the aircraft is not stabilized? What if the masks fell from the ceiling and you were forced to face something you never thought could happen to you? Here, you can find out what the passengers experienced on the flight. Japanese Airlines took off smoothly from Shanghai to Osaka. The plane, a Boeing 737-800, was at an altitude of almost 10,000 meters at crash. It wasn't a gentle descent. It was a plunge, a real plunge, with screams, bodies slamming against seatbelt, crying children, and adults saying goodbye on their cell phone. An emergency landing followed at Kansai Airport in Japan. Everyone survived, but many said they would never board a plane so calmly again. One might think that was an isolated incident, but that wasn't the case. It was the first step in an upward trend. A few days later, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner from Air India crashed shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad. What was supposed to be a flight to London turned into a tragedy. Of the 242 people on board, only one survived. And that's not a statistic, but an outcry. A brutal reminder that, despite all the technology, the skies can still betray us. And that just 2 days later, another flight with the same airline, this time bound for Vienna, plunged 275 meters into the air shortly after takeoff. There were no injuries, but panic and despair spread, and a nervous silence reigned in the cabin as those who realized they had narrowly escaped the news. 1 week, 3 flights, 3 horrors, 1 catastrophe. If you've ever flown, you know what it means to entrust your life to a machine you don't control, a pilot you don't know, an invisible safety system that promises to work, but when it fails miserably. It is a blind trust, but it must exist, because without it, no one could fly. And then another question arises: is this trust still deserved? The answer is uncomfortable, because it doesn't come with certainty, but with statistics and promises, with technical reports and press releases. But numbers don't reassure people. Stories do. And the stories that have been raining down from the sky lately aren't exactly reassuring. Stories like the one from the domestic flightwater Batik in Indonesia. The plane nearly landed on its wing during a storm, at such an angle that passengers could see the approaching runway through the side window. The plane stabilized, but the trauma remained. Or that of an ordinary passenger, like you or me, who wrote in a travel forum, "I've been thinking about taking my 6-year-old daughter to visit her grandparents in Japan, but after everything I've read this week, I'm hesitant to buy one. I've never been afraid of flying, but now I'm hesitant, and I've never been afraid of flying. This hesitation is growing. And it's not about alarmism, it's about perception, a collective sensitivity that demands attention from passengers who once closed their eyes and relaxed, and who now keep their eyes open, inspecting the row of masks, assessing the emergency exit, and seeking comfort in promises that no longer seem so valid. That's why this conversation is important. After all, we're all on the same plane, even if you don't know it yet. Today, it could be a passenger in Asia. Tomorrow, it could be you, your family, or a loved one. And perhaps the real question isn't, is flying safe? But is the industry actually taking these warnings seriously? Or are we just hiding our fear until the next scare? If you believe these stories deserve to be told, and we should view the skies with less naivety and more awareness, subscribe to the channel now. Like this video and share it with everyone who flies, with those who were afraid, with those who think, that will never happen to me, because the truth is out there somewhere, and we're here to bring it to light. There's one name that keeps cropping up in recent incidents, almost like an unpleasant echo. It's not an airport, it's not an airline, it's a symbol of modern aviation, or at least it once was: Boeing. What do you feel when you hear this name? Trust? Tradition? Or a hint of doubt that wasn't there a few years ago? It's hard to ignore. The plane that crashed on Japan Airlines was a Boeing 737-800. The model involved in the fatal crash in India was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Soon, a list of breakdowns and emergencies began to pile up. But is this a new phenomenon? Or are we just beginning to recognize what was already there, buried under decades of prestige? Since 2000, more than a dozen fatal accidents, they were linked to aircraft from the American company. Most were attributed to human error or adverse weather condition. But when the same names, the same models, and the same problems keep cropping up, the question inevitably arises: Are we dealing with isolated failures or with systemic problems? Perhaps the most symbolic case of this shift in perception occurred between 2018 and 2019, when two Boeing 737 MAX aircraft crashed just 5 months apart, killing 346 people. The cause? An automatic flight control software called MCAS, which was designed to correct the aircraft's climb angle and, ironically, became the cause of the crash. The most disturbing detail? Boeing knew about the problem. Internal documents show that engineers expressed concerns even before the model's market launch. But the pressure to meet deadlines, cut costs, and compete with rival Airbus was greater, much greater. And, as always, the price was paid with human lives. But why is this important now? Even after the 737 MAX scandal, the company continued production. Several models returned to the skies with minor modification, but trust wasn't easy to restore. And in light of recent events, it's crumbling again. Put yourself in the shoes of someone working in this industry. Imagine you were a young pilot, fresh out of college, stepping into the cockpit of a second-generation 737, feeling deeply that something was wrong with the aircraft's design, but unable to openly question it. Or imagine you were a seasoned mechanic, watching as budgets were cut and parts were replaced with cheaper alternatives, while demand for flights skyrocketed. How far can silence go when profit is more important than security? This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a portrait based on research, reports, and expert testimony. Boeing has long been considered a symbol of American aviation excellence, but something has changed in the last 20 years. The obsession with financial performance has swallowed the engineering spirit. A 2023 U.S. Senate report found that employees who attempted to report irregularities in quality processes were ignored or silenced. In one case, an engineer reported being told not to report repeated failures of electronic components because doing so would damage the company's reputation. How many alarms were turned off to keep up appearances? But perhaps most disturbing is time, not chronological time. The other time, the time of repetition, of mistakes we don't learn from, of tragedies that should have changed everything, but only paved the way for the next one. What if we were currently experiencing not a technological collapse, but an ethical collapse? Because it's not just about plane crash, it's about the culture that allows them to fly. What's accepted? What's ignored? What's glossed over so as not to scare off investors, even if it costs passengers their lives? Now think about all your flights, the rushed connections, the rainy takeoffs, the vague announcements about technical problems you heard over the loudspeakers. What if behind these small details lies a poorly coordinated decision-making machine operating at the limits of its capability, further increasing the risks? We may never know how many times luck has saved us. But the question remains, how long will you continue to do this work alone? If you believe these truths deserve to be spoken, unfiltered, unvarnished, unapologetic, then this channel is for you. Like this video, subscribe now, and click the bell. Because in the next episodes, we'll reveal how the aviation crisis extends beyond the airline, and why every passenger is affected more than you think. Do you really want to know what's going on behind the clouds? So stay with us, because this is just the beginning. Imagine an airplane you've seen 1,000 times. The same color, the same model, the same soothing engine note. What you may not know, beneath its flawless surface, this aircraft has already completed more than 30,000 flight cycles, takeoffs and landings accumulated over the years. Behind the shiny body lie signs of wear and tear, metal that vibrates too much. Screws have been replaced countless times, structures in desperate need of reinforcement, and yet it still runs. Behind the scenes in aviation, this has a name: old aircraft, and they are not the exception, they are the rule. According to data from Here You Are, more than 40% of commercial aircraft worldwide have more than 20 years of service. In many countries, especially the most populous and developing ones, it is common for airlines to operate fleets that are more than 25 or even 30 years old. And what should be the exception, such as replacing components due to missing originals, upgrading sensors, or manually resetting software is becoming increasingly routine. This is not scaremongering, but a technical reality. An aircraft is designed for durability, but everything has its limit. And when profit requires exceeding those limits, safety depends on something not mentioned in the manual. Classify. This is the invisible part of the crisis, the silent collapse. While passengers buy tickets through apps and view attractive images on airline websites, the story behind the scenes tells a different story. In a report by Global Flight Over, 75% of low-cost airlines operating in Asia, Africa, and Latin America have declared delays or reductions in aircraft maintenance programs in 2024, often due to a lack of financial resources, spare parts, or qualified personnel. But the crisis is not just technical in nature, it is also human. Today, the world is facing the largest pilot shortage in modern aviation history. According to Boeing, more than 600,000 new pilots by 2040 to meet global demand. Schools are accelerating training, reducing the number of simulators, and shortening training hours. Pilots with fewer than 400 flight hours are already being deployed on commercial routes in countries that previously required twice that number. Would you trust your life to someone who barely has time to make mistakes during training? And this is repeated in all sectors. There is a shortage soil mechanic, maintenance technician, air traffic controller in 2023. The United States reported that more than 20% of air traffic control posts were empty, resulting in long shifts and exhausted air traffic controllers monitoring dozens of flights per hour. At smaller airports, there are cases where air traffic controllers alone during rush hour. What happens if someone falls asleep? What if they forget a button? Behind every safe landing lie hundreds of human decisions, and each one brings with it more pressure, more acceleration, and more vulnerability. It's not that the system is collapsing. It's already broken, and now it's surviving in emergency mode. After the crash in Ahmedabad, the Indian government set up an aviation safety task force. The number of inspections increased, and the results were shocking. Aircraft with falsified reports, incomplete checklists, and faulty sensors ignored, all to avoid delays, just to save minutes. And when minutes turn into human lives, no one wants to face the consequences. However, the problem is not limited to India, Asia, or developing countries. In 2024, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, published more than 500 potential risk reports for U.S. airlines. The time frame is less than 6 months. Some of these are large carriers with thousands of flights per week. What was once the exception now seems to be the rule. And in times like these, even what was considered preventive becomes a new warning signal. Emergency landings, returns to the gate, delays due to minor technical issues. These were once considered excessive. Today, probably. Are we experiencing more accidents, or are we simply ignoring them? The feeling that something is wrong isn't paranoia, it's perception. Heaven has always seemed distant, unattainable. But what happens up there, to parts, people, entire systems, affects us down here. It affects your vacation trip. It affects your relative visiting for work. It affects your child participating in an exchange. Because this isn't just a story about airplanes, it's a story about decisions. And the question that arises is direct. How many traffic lights have to flash before someone brakes? If this content has made you think and has kept you thinking, it's because it's important. Support this initiative. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who still believe that planes don't crash, because maybe they don't always crash, but when they do, it's almost never by accident. And in the next part, we explain what comes after fear and why it could be the catalyst the industry needed to wake up, or the last chance to do so before the next tragedy. Ultimately, the question is no longer whether flying is safe. The real question that goes through every passenger's mind as the plane rocks is, to what extent do we pretend that we have everything under control? After analyzing the recent cases, the hidden statistics, the technical failures, and the behind-the-scenes silence of global aviation, it's impossible to escape unscathed. What appeared to be a series of isolated incidents is gradually coming together like the pieces of a complex puzzle, a pattern, a warning. And now it's time to look at what this pattern is trying to tell us. What we've seen in recent months aren't just operational problems, simple outages, or local issues. They are symptoms of a system that has grown too big, too fast, and too profitable, and is now being supported by a web of bad decisions, an exhausted workforce, and outdated technology without anyone noticing or wanting to admit it. But perhaps it is not the aircraft that have aged the most. It is trust. The trust cultivated for decades, nurtured by optimistic statistics, the illusion of infallibility, the reassuring silence when things go wrong. And now this trust is crumbling because we see it, we hear it, we feel it. And when trust is broken, everything changes. On flights, there are more suspicious glances than cheerful smiles. Passengers watch the crew for signs of calm. Every unusual noise becomes a warning signal. Every delayed landing is interpreted as a risk. And even without speaking, fear hangs in the air. A silent fear, civilly and socially contained, but profoundly real. But maybe this isn't a tragedy. Maybe this fear is exactly what the industry needed. Because fear does not paralyze if it is well controlled. Warn, correct, transform. The aviation industry has learned to evolve despite the challenges. Major safety reforms were only implemented after disasters, after the loss of life, after devastating headlines. But what if this time zone change could happen sooner? If we recognize the cracks now and have the courage to speak out, then perhaps we are not in the midst of a crisis, but at the beginning of an awakening. And to wake up, numbers and technical reports alone are not enough. We demand collective awareness. We demand that every single passenger, you, me, everyone, know what's happening. Ask, demand, share, because the more information there is, the harder it is to ignore it. And the harder it is to ignore it, the harder it is to keep the game going as before. If you've come this far, it's because you feel like something needs to change. And this change begins with small gestures. One click, one comment, one conversation with someone who still believes that these things only happen in the distance. It's no longer about statistics. It's a question of responsibility. And it is urgently necessary not to wait for the next accident, but to ask ourselves, why didn't anyone do anything before? If this video has opened your eye, given you food for thought, or simply made you realize the weight of current events hanging over our heads, give it a thumbs up, sign in, share this with anyone who needs to understand that safety in the air starts below. And comment below, have you ever been afraid of flying? Or better said, do you still have confidence when the plane takes off? Your voice counts more than you think. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for empathizing. In the next videos, we will continue to reveal what many prefer to hide. In the sky, in companies, behind the scenes, where decisions are made away from the public eye. Get ready, because the truth keeps flying, and we will follow him wherever he leads us. See you on the next flight.